Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified YouTube channel. And today we're talking about Kickstarter versus GoFundMe versus Patreon and getting into a breakdown of that today. Okay, so first of all, I think the most important thing to think about is who are these for and how can you use them? And also obviously some of the pros and the cons. So I want to go through each of them: Kickstarter, GoFundMe, and Patreon. And we're going to be kind of going through, first of all, some of these different decision criteria, like who is it for, what can you use it for in the best cases, and then I'll provide some advice on the pros and the cons there. I hope that you find this video to be useful for you, whatever stage it is that you're in, or whatever you're trying to raise money for. And also, if you want more content like this, obviously go and check out the other videos I got on my channel. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, Kickstarter, right? So Kickstarter is for creative types or people that are coming out with new projects and new ideas. One of the guidelines of Kickstarter is that it must create some kind of a product. So you can't just raise money for a charity or strictly for a nonprofit and donate it to a cause. You have to have some kind of an end product at the end of the day, and that's where Kickstarter comes in. So if you're launching a new game, a tabletop, if you're launching maybe a book, that could be related to a nonprofit. Could be something that's like a hardware, design, tech, something along those lines. You have some kind of an end product which you are producing, and yet you're going to be available on the perks or the rewards for that actual Kickstarter campaign. That's really who it's designed for and who it's best for. Most notably, you have all or nothing fundraising, so you have to hit or exceed your fundraising goal on Kickstarter in order to keep those funds that have been raised. And also, it's a one-off event, so you have a 30-day campaign duration or a 60-day campaign duration, and then you're running that campaign for that duration. It's either successful or it's not. In terms of who Kickstarter is not for, it's not really for someone who's trying to raise on a continual basis. It's not for someone who's trying to do just a charity raise. So it's not going to be the best for those types of individuals. Let's compare that to GoFundMe. So GoFundMe is, I'd say strictly, or in many cases, a charity fundraising website. So you can technically use it to raise money for a business, right? But most people are using it as a charity or a nonprofit fundraising website. And by that I mean it's usually for personal causes. So things like medical bills, travel costs, personal costs, education-related costs, those types of things. You're usually running a GoFundMe campaign. And you might have even seen it on the news where someone's kind of running it for a disadvantaged person or someone who is Reddit famous or something happened to them and everyone wanted to chip in and raise money for them. So I think of it more in the line of charity. However, you can technically run a GoFundMe for a business, but it is not as common. And usually people that are giving money to a business usually want something in return. So that's maybe to be an investor or to own portions of your product, to do a pre-order, which you would use Kickstarter for anyway. So with GoFundMe, there aren't technically any platform fees, right? But technically they will ask the people that are donating to your campaign to make a donation to the actual site. So that's the way that that one works. You can keep the campaign open. If you want to, you could say like, I'm trying to raise this amount of money, right? So you can have that goal in that same way. But at the end of the day, there really aren't the same, I say, caliber of perks and rewards which you can offer with a Kickstarter campaign, which is usually why it's not designed as a platform to raise money and like ship out products as a result of that. So usually think of Kickstarter more creative types, more entrepreneurs, individuals like that, tabletop game creators, comic book creators, etc. You think GoFundMe, you think more of like raising money for a particular need or a cause or something along those lines. And you can also raise money on the behalf of someone else, which would be known as a beneficiary. So let's then also compare who it's for when it comes to Patreon, right? So Patreon is really for creative types and people that want to raise money on a continual basis. So we'll just say that that period is monthly, right? So you've probably seen a lot of YouTubers or podcasters who are doing Patreon campaigns. And that's because you can kind of have an insider exclusive community where people are paying to be a part of that. And there are different levels at which they can support you. Now, this is very different from a Kickstarter campaign because a Kickstarter is usually a one-off experience, or you could go then and launch another campaign. With a Patreon, it's almost like it's open and you might have a certain goal, but people are supporting you or backing you or gaining access to that insider exclusive community on a monthly or on a periodic recurring basis. So on the flip side, the donation amounts or the pledge amounts are usually lower with a Patreon campaign. Because you might see $5, $10, $15, $25, usually closer to 25 to 50 with the Kickstarter campaign. But on the flip side, you're getting that recurring donation, or there's recurring people that are supporting your work, your creative work. And you can also go and check on Patreon some of the different categories that are available there. Okay, so now that we talked about who is best for these different platforms, let's talk a tiny bit about what you need in order to get one of these campaigns going. So again, I'm going to go through the lineup. So first, it starts with Kickstarter. What are you going to need to do a Kickstarter campaign? Well, number one, you're going to need the prototype of the product. You're going to need photos of that, ideally some sketches. You're going to need a campaign page. You're going to have to pick out what rewards or perks you're offering, and you're also going to need a campaign video. So the campaign video, maybe back in the early days you didn't need one, but nowadays you definitely need a video, particularly if you're doing a physical product of some kind. You don't necessarily have to be in the video, but you do need a video at least to talk a little bit about the product. And that's mainly, I'd say, the components of a Kickstarter campaign. With a GoFundMe campaign, it's a little bit different. So usually, again, GoFundMe is a little bit more of a charity fundraising platform. You're probably going to more likely just need a compelling story and a compelling ask. So I've seen many GoFundMe campaigns that don't have a video that have been successful. You can search on the site, you can see that for yourself as well. So the main thing you're gonna need, number one, is the story or the need, the reason why you're raising money. Some photos I do think help a lot with kind of providing that credibility or the meaning behind the need. You're also gonna have to have a very tiny, I'd say, marketing strategy in terms of letting people know about what it is that you're doing and why you're raising money. And then finally, you're gonna have to pick if you're gonna be doing this yourself, your own raise, or if you're gonna have a beneficiary and you're raising money on their behalf. And you'd actually be surprised the number of people that will do that. Then when it comes to Patreon, so Patreon, again, is like an insider community. So you might be producing and publishing stuff in that insider community, which might be a multimedia format style content. So you might be posting videos or photos or those kinds of things in Patreon. For the actual campaign, you're probably gonna have a header of some kind. You might have a description. You may or may not have some multimedia there. It's kind of up to you, I'd say, with the Patreon. Again, with this campaign, with the subscription-based crowdfunding, which is Patreon, a lot of people are subscribing to you based off of some other platform that they've seen you on. So maybe they saw your YouTube channel, right? And they decided to want to subscribe to you on Patreon, or they listened to your podcast, or they read your blog post, which was entertaining and witty and informative and all those different things, and they decided to subscribe to your Patreon. So those are the main things you're going to need. It is helpful, of course, to have a little bit of a marketing strategy there as well, I'd say. But in terms of the bare bones, what you gotta have, that's the main components. Next, I wanna kind of compare a tiny bit more of why people engage on these platforms, why it is that they support, why do they give money, why do they buy, and we'll kind of compare the platforms that way. So with Kickstarter, people are backing projects, right? They're backing the campaign. So when they do that, they are expecting something in return. I call this the obligation, right? So when they select a certain perk or reward, it's your obligation to ship out those perks or rewards to the backer. Or if it's a virtual one, to deliver it to the backer. So let's just say, for example, you created a new app or something like that, or a new software product, let's just say, and you're doing an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter campaign, maybe one of the reward here is that they get a subscription to the app or they get access to the app. If it's a physical product, obviously they get maybe the physical product and you need their shipping information in order to send that to them. So it's usually a little bit more in the way of like a pre-order platform, and that's really the obligation there. And the reason why people are backing it is that they want to receive this really cool thing in the mail. They want to be able to put their hands on and to really feel the product and to try it out and to show it off to their friends. They're early adopters, and they're also, of course, supporting the creator. I've done studies on this within my own forum, kickstarterforum.org, and also in general when it comes to all my coaching students and people that I've interviewed in the past, and also just backers of different campaigns. And I'll tell you that it's part, not only the motivation to own, but also the wanting to be a part of a community, if you will, and also to support the creator. So there are a few different reasons at play. When it comes to GoFundMe, the difference here is that this is more in line with the book that I wrote called Nonprofit Fundraising Hacks, or Nonprofit Crowdfunding Explained. That's another book I wrote in the same genre there. But Nonprofit Fundraising Hacks goes through the psychological triggers that you have to hit if you want to get someone to actually buy a product. I'll be sure to include a link to that down below. So not to buy a product, to donate to a fundraiser or to donate to a GoFundMe campaign. So the reason why people make this donation, the reason why people are engaging in that way and they're willing to contribute to your fundraiser has to do with a few different things. Number one is this feeling of empathy. They feel empathy towards you. And they've actually done studies where they've done MRIs, fMRIs, and they've also done skin conductance tests where they will put in front of someone a different story. And when the person has more empathy towards the main characters in that story, they are more likely to donate for a particular cause that relates to that story. So number one, you got to trigger that emotion of empathy. People have to empathize with you either because of a friendship, a personal relationship, a news story that they saw maybe, and they see that situation and they maybe feel a sense of injustice, right? They empathize with what that situation is and they want to feel less uncomfortable and right that feeling by giving money. So actually they start to not only feel empathy, but as a result of empathizing with the situation, they then feel an uncomfortable emotion. So that emotion could be frustration, anger, feeling of injustice, feeling of guilt, feel bad in some way. And in order to alleviate that feeling, they will actually give money. So this might be, for example, if you see a television commercial or you see some issue happening in the news and it causes these feelings of discomfort in you, it can actually lead to a bunch of donations to that particular cause. And the giving money is actually a way for a human being to alleviate that feeling of distress and discomfort within them. And then at least by giving money, they can at least let that out of their mind and like, okay, at least I did something to help with the situation. There are many different reasons why people will donate to a GoFundMe campaign. They also can just sincerely want this person to do well and they don't necessarily feel any bad emotions. So I'm not trying to make a blanket statement here, but there are a lot of different reasons, but the main ones are going to be your story, the need, a feeling like they can help, a feeling like they can make an impact. So if it's like a drop in the bucket compared to what you're going to need, probably not going to be as compelling to make a donation. But if they feel like it could actually inch your fundraising meter forward, they're more likely to because they feel like that they are having an impact versus just donating to some big corporate faceless nonprofit organization where only $1 of the $10 that you give are actually going to help. In this case, they're directly helping you with a GoFundMe campaign. Patreon is a little bit in the middle, I'd say, but it's more in line with what a Kickstarter is there for. However, there's another component, which is with Patreon, it's subscription-based crowdfunding, right? So people are donating on a recurring basis. So at any point in time, they can cancel their pledge, right? They can cancel that subscription. So there's sort of a few different components. The first one is wanting to support the creator 100%. I'll tell you, anyone who's supporting a Patreon usually in some way admires, respects, likes, values the creator or the person who's making the mini creations that they make available on Patreon in the insider community. The second is wanting to get insider exclusive access, right? In the same way that you maybe want to be a part of the first batch of people to board a plane, right? Or you want to be in this exclusive kind of cocktail lounge that not a lot of people are allowed into, or you want to be the first to own something. There's that feeling of exclusivity when you are a part of someone's Patreon community because you really are one of their freaking hardcore fans, right? In the same way that if you were a fan of a musician and you're showing up at the after photos or before photos, you're really obviously a hardcore fan of that person. And it's one way to kind of separate yourself from the pack, to feel really a bit interesting, to also see content that you might not see on their actual YouTube channel. I publish a lot of stuff on my own mastermind, right, that I don't put in my YouTube channel. Same thing with my courses. I tell people with my coaching programs, etc. So it's also a way to share that insider information with Patreon, and people are going to join for that exclusive feel. The last thing I would say is that people who are part of the Patreon, if they continue to receive that novelty feeling, like new stuff is always coming out, it's exciting. I feel like I'm in an insider's club. I'm getting news before anyone else. I'm supporting the creator. This is tangibly showing me how my contribution is helping with their creative work. They then stay a subscriber of that person as long as there's no like financial issues or anything like that. The next component I want to go over in comparing these different platforms is just talking a tiny bit about like who is it and at what stage do they enter launching one of these campaigns. So who is this good for? I kind of talked about it a little bit initially, but I want to talk about the stage in your own creative journey or in your own, I guess, life when it comes to a fundraiser that this is going to happen for you. So with a Kickstarter, it's typically for someone who already has that prototype or that iteration that's done, right? And they already have a pretty concrete idea, at least of what they want to do. If you're just still in the idea stage, probably not gonna be enough, not gonna be tangible enough for you to launch a Kickstarter campaign. So you at least gotta have that check marked. With the GoFundMe, you could do it immediately. And you can broadcast that to your network. So there's actually not that much in the way of a barrier to entry, which means a lot of people are launching campaigns, right? However, there is a bit of a formula or tactics and techniques that I talk about in my book, Crowdfunding Personal Expenses. And you should be doing a few things before you go live with the GoFundMe. For example, warming people up to the idea, talking about the story, talking about the need, showing how they can help, all those kinds of checkmark boxes that I was kind of talking about a little bit earlier, those psychological triggers, you do want to hit those, but you can launch this thing very quickly if you want to. And with Patreon, I would say Patreon is more of a long-term play. So think of this as like a marathon. A Kickstarter campaign is much more like a sprint in that you are executing on a project, there's a certain time duration, really compressed, a lot of activity going on in those 30 days or in that 3-month time frame, maybe when you're preparing for it. There's a lot that is happening in that process. With Patreon, it's more of a marathon. So you can get a page together really quickly and you can launch it very quickly. However, you're probably not going to see results right away unless you already have an existing audience. If you have an existing audience where you're just announcing this Patreon to, then it can be a very quick thing for you to get going. However, if you have a small audience or no audience and you're launching the Patreon, it's going to take time for that boulder to kind of get to the momentum going where it's really going down the hill rapid fire. Or I guess if a snowball needs to collect a lot more in order to become a really big snowball, right, that's going down the hill. So Patreon is more of a long-term marathon, I would say. Kickstarter is a bit more of a sprint when compared to Patreon, in my opinion. And also with Patreon, you will grow as a creator with what you decide to offer. Over time, your audience is going to grow, so you also are going to grow in terms of the number of contributions that you get. And I think it's really great for anyone who already has an audience as well. Really easy way to monetize it if you already got an audience. We already ran over fees a tiny bit, but I want to just make sure it's solid, right? So first of all, with fees and expenses, let's talk about that with each of these platforms. Kickstarter, with fees and expenses, the main fee you're going to be paying is the Kickstarter 5% fee, which is on the amount of money which you have raised successfully, and you're also going to be paying payment processing fees. There are other costs that are associated with doing a Kickstarter campaign. Most of the days, most people are thinking about the actual product, the costs that go into that, and also the marketing costs. If you're going to be doing marketing related to a Kickstarter campaign, which I would definitely recommend, you should look into my channel more, check out the Kickstarter launch formula. It will tell you everything that you need to know when it comes to the marketing side of doing one of these projects. When it comes to GoFundMe, GoFundMe used to charge a fee, but now they charge no fee, right? But then of course, as I said before, they will ask your donor for a donation. So it's a different model, a different marketplace there, but they're going to be basically asking your donor. And of course, there are credit card processing fees and those types of things. With a Patreon campaign, it's going to vary based on the amount of functionality that you need. So you should check Patreon because they do also upgrade that and they change it from time to time. So make sure you look at the actual specifics there, but there's going to be a main fee. And then if you want more functionality, a higher fee if you want to that you can pay. Want to take all the stress out of fulfilling your Kickstarter rewards? Fulfillrite is the turnkey solution that puts product delivery on autopilot. The Top Campaigns uses trusted high-tech provider to store, package, and ship their products. Focus on growing your business. Leave shipping to the experts. Don't wait. Get a custom quote from Fulfillrite today. Link in the description. So I'm going to make a recommendation. We're going to kind of just close off the video with a recommendation for you, which is which path should you go down? And what are the resources that are available to you to help with doing one of these campaigns? Because I think that's really, if you're doing it yourself, it can be kind of overwhelming, right? So it's like, what are the resources that are available to you? And we can kind of end on that note. First of all, so if you are a creative type, if you're looking to create a product, you create a tabletop, create a publishing empire, right? Or you're trying to come out with a new technology gadget or gizmo or tarot cards or anything that's like a physical product of some kind, you should definitely check out Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Those are kind of the two, Indiegogo is an alternative to Kickstarter, but both of them are pretty famous. I would definitely look into both of those. I would start tuning into my podcast, the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Check out my book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula. You just want to start absorbing information. And the reason I put out the podcast is just so that you guys know every single day projects are being funded, right? You need to start to listen to those success stories and pay attention to what people are doing well. It is 100% possible to smash your goal now on Kickstarter. We're seeing tons of new projects that are being launched, right? So this is something that is realistic. And if you're a creative type, an entrepreneur, or just someone who wants to come out with something new, I definitely think this is a good decision for you going forward. Now, if you're just trying to either raise money for charity, raise money to donate it in some way for a benefactor, for someone that you're going to give money to who's disadvantaged, or raise it for yourself for a certain need, education expenses, medical bills, other costs, travel costs, personal expenses, you're going to want to use GoFundMe because you can't use Kickstarter for that, and Patreon does not make sense, right? So you're going to want to use Kickstarter. Unless you're trying to start a new career of some sort, maybe then you might want to consider doing one of the others. But if it's really just for a personal need and it's not related to starting a business or a career, and it's more for education for something like that, then you can use GoFundMe. So I would recommend that for you in the audience. In terms of the resources that you have available, so there are things that obviously go into doing a GoFundMe campaign. I'd say the biggest resources are on the educational side. So go and check out my book, Crowdfunding Personal Expenses. I got a free course as well when it comes to GoFundMe you can check out. But those are the main things, is just to get more knowledge. And then if you want to, you can maybe book a coaching call with me. A lot of my clients tend to be more on the Kickstarter side or Patreon side or now equity crowdfunding side. I do every once in a while help nonprofit organizations and individuals that are doing charity fundraiser campaigns, but it is going to cost you. So you have to be willing to spend money in order to have a professional look at your campaign, give suggestions, those types of things. And I probably would recommend doing as much work as you can, because it does get expensive to hire any kind of marketing help there. The last thing I'll say is with Patreon. So Patreon is a bit of a different animal, and it's really interesting to me also the stages at which people are launching Patreon campaigns. So my biggest, one of the biggest issues I think with Patreon is that a lot of creators are beginning creators and they don't yet have a budget when it comes to things like marketing or investing in a coach or a consultant or someone to help them out. So a lot of beginning creators are just kind of learning on their own. And I'll be honest with you, take my free content and just absorb it, learn from it, right? You don't have to spend money or anything like that. I would really just, if you could, spend a little bit of time educating yourself on Patreon, how it works, some of the content I got out there. I got some great blog articles as well. And I'm thinking about maybe putting together an ebook or something like that that can help on Patreon, because I actually have a lot of great thoughts when it comes to tactics related to marketing that just so many people are not even using, and it astounds me, right? So I'm thinking about putting out a guide on Patreon in the future. But for now, that would be the main thing. If you do have funding to be able to book a coaching call or a consulting call or something like that, you can always look into that with me. I can give my best to tell you, number one, does what you are doing have legs? You have a big enough audience. Number two, how do you transition that audience in order to have a successful campaign? And number three, at what point in time could you maybe look into hiring someone to help with marketing or help you in other ways? If you are already doing something, you're already getting a following, that is amazing. If you're in the beginning stages, I would really think about how can I begin to build an audience now and then monetize it with Patreon. Because if you have 0 followers and you're trying to launch a Patreon, it's gonna be much more difficult for you, much harder to sell, and running ads is gonna have to be razor thin profit margins on that. So it's gonna be a lot harder if you're just starting from 0, the goose egg, which I know I got started from 0 and it's really hard the first couple of months, couple of years even. But it's definitely possible. So that's something that I would say there. Hope that this video was useful or helpful for you. And always looking to do more content. So if you've got any questions, leave a comment down below. I want to put out more videos in general on these different topics. So it'd be super useful to me. Give me a thumbs up if you did like it, so other people know that it's worth their time. And I hope that the way I broke it down was at least useful and helpful for you going forward. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman, and I'll see you next time.